Okay, can you hear me? Yes. Okay, so I did my introduction already, so I'm not going to repeat that. I'm here today to tell you that the future of cybersecurity needs you. And actually, that the future of cybersecurity needs all of us. And in the next 30, 40 minutes, I'm going to try to explain why do I think that. I'm going to present the two of the biggest challenges that I think we are facing in cybersecurity, and they are going to be key in the next 5 to 10 years if we want to, let's say, make a difference. And I'm going to go a bit further and split, let's say, categorize the 3 other areas in which these 2 challenges can be approached, so kind of to reduce it. So I want to thank you for being here, and I know it has been a very long day, at least for me. So I hope you are enjoying the conference, and I hope you enjoy tomorrow as well. So just to note, I was trying to do something different, so I put a lot of QR codes for references. You can try that and let me know if that works. I hope they are bright enough. For starting, I want to start in 1969. 1969 was an important year from my point of view in the history of humanity, because it was where the first ARPANET communication was successfully established. And this is not a day that we remember very often. It's really curious because, thank you. Because it was a really big deal, right? And in this year, in 1969, it was a year where we connected 2 computers for the first time through internet. And this was a revolution for every area of our lives. And it was such a big deal that from that moment on, we never stopped. And actually, there is really low chances that we are going back. I had a childhood without internet, and I saw what it was without and with internet. And actually, I'm not willing to let it go, right? We use it for everything. And I say it's a revolution in every area of our lives, because since the moment it started, the information that we share is massive, right? It's widespread. All the different type of sciences start progressing so much faster, only because the knowledge was shared much faster, because publications were made online, you could access them, and it was really significant. So for me, and it's going to be, it's crucial to understand, because from this point in time on, it was what we started to call like the digital life started here. And it started with computers, as you all know. In the really, really beginning, it was really expensive, the access, so you had to think about what you want to do before doing it, and then just connecting, doing that, and disconnecting because it was really expensive. And you have to actually go physically to where the computer was located to actually connect to the internet and access that, right? And things got better with the personal computer, because you could kind of have it in your own home. Even if internet was expensive, you could actually have it. But the next revolution came with the mobile phone. Actually, the mobile phone that had internet access, because that made that we could have whatever we had before with the computer and internet, that we had it everywhere, in the metro, in a plane, while we are waiting for the bus, or in the bathroom if we want to, right? We are usually not conscious of how many or how much impact does this cause in our lives. We use this everywhere. And many of us think that this is it, right? Mobile phones were the latest thing, and we are still going through that. But that's not true. It didn't stop there, did it? Because after that, we went further. We start connecting everything that we could think of: light bulbs, fridges, printers, cars, we have the smartphones where suddenly it's a Friday and you get a text from your fridge that you need bread or milk, whatever. It didn't stop there. We start connecting other type of things, even more critical type of things, such as industries, factories, nuclear plants, power grids. So it really started to be really complex very fast. And this marked a transition between physical lives and what we call digital lives, right? And this transition is really important that we understand it, because before we were pure, let's say, physical. If we are talking, for example, about our records, like criminal records, healthcare records, pictures, anything like that was physical. And it suddenly started becoming more digitalized. But it was not just that. It was also what started transitioning to the digital thing was also ourselves, right? For example, 50 years ago, if I wanted to know, I don't know, what type of music do you like? I have to go to you, say, hey, hi, how are you? What type of music do you want, right? Do you like, I don't know, Bon Jovi? Oh, yes, oh, no. I have to physically interact with you to actually know you, right? To get this information out of you. For example, another example is if I wanted to know what political opinion do you have, if you like Trump or not, I had to actually be physically sharing the same physical space to actually, and listening to you talking, to actually know that type of information. But that is not happening anymore. And I'm not talking about Facebook, right? But right now, everything that we do, everything that we are is online. Our pictures, our documents, our files, and also what do we like, what do we don't like, what political opinion do we have, and other things. And I'm mentioning it here because this characterizes what we are observing now. Before, criminals were also physical, right? If they wanted to steal your pictures for some reason, they had to go physically to your place and steal your pictures and live with a box of pictures physically and take them out. Right now, you don't see that, right? Right now, you are attacked by a computer, which actually you don't know what is behind the computer. It can be another computer, like we see that every day. It can be a businessman, it can be a company, it can be a normal criminal. They also transition to this digital world. So let's see some examples. Last year, there was reported that the bank of Bangladesh was victim of a theft of 80 million US dollars. And actually, this theft was possible because part of their systems was infected by malware. And this piece of malware allowed them to understand how the bank transactions took place, how this was happening, and understand that, okay, in this point in time, we can act. And I think they stole the $80 million in less than a day. So it was really fast, right? But in order to do that, they had to infect the systems with malware. Another example of this collision between physical and digital is the case of Ahmed Mansour. He's a blogger and a human rights defendant. He is right now in prison, and he was very famous because he was targeted with a 0-day on iOS. So he was actually in 2011, he was already in prison by the United Arab Emirates country because he spoke against the president. And in this case, the government was targeting him to try to surveil him, and they didn't send people to watch him, right? They attacked his device so they knew that his phone is with him all the time. And for that, they didn't use some physical thing, they used software. And this was a huge case. Actually, the iPhone attack was the third attempt of the government of use spyware, high-level spyware against him. So it's not like we are moving completely to the digital. We are still physical, like I'm here, you're here, right? But there is like whatever we do in the digital world can affect the physical world and vice versa, right? Whatever we do in the physical world can also affect the digital. And an example of that is, for example, in May, I'm sure how many of you heard about WannaCry? Okay. How many of you heard about Petya? Okay. How many of you heard about Sality? Okay. So WannaCry and Petya are two huge ransomwares that it was like a huge outbreak. I don't need to explain to you, but I'm mentioning it here because before this, before ransomware, malware was something that, yeah, a computer virus. And ransomware was taking away from you for the first time stuff that you loved. Your pictures, your document, it was taking it away from you. And this became more critical with WannaCry and Petya because their spreading was so fast and massive that in less than 12 hours there was like thousands of infections everywhere. And I mention it here because this type of malware, for the first time, affected lives, human lives, right? A hospital, several of them were infected or affected, and that put in risk people, actual people, right? So it was a huge, big deal. And on the other hand, Sality is a botnet that I think it's alive for almost 10 years, and you know how many people actually knows about them, and is still be able to infect people, and it's not a big deal. Ransomware is different because you actually know it, like you know you're infected. Another example is crash override. How many of you heard about that? Okay, so crash override is a very recent example on a sophisticated malware that was responsible for taking out or powering off power grid central in Ukraine. This attack happened before last Christmas, and actually a huge part of Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, and surrounding areas were powered off, and they didn't have electricity for, I think, a couple of hours. And this was caused with a piece of malware. And it was this specific malware is the second of the kind that was actually used to attack physical systems. The previous one is Stuxnet that attacked the central for processing uranium in Middle East. And this is also a big deal because it shows us that how we are not joking anymore, right? It is not commodity financial malware that steals your money. It's actually malware that is affecting your life, like right now. So the question is, how do we defend from this, right? Because this is really bad, we all know, but what do we do? So Cisco has defined something that is called attack continuum, which defines that there are like 3 main stages when it comes to attack and how to defend. One is before the attack it happens, then it's during attack is happening, and then it's after. After is basically, well, you're already infected, right? So let's take a brief look about this. So before an attack happens, there are a lot of things that take place that you can do and you can work on to protect and prevent the attacks. It starts defining what do you want to protect, because it's not the same. You want to protect information, you want to protect people, you want to protect your servers and keep the uptime of your website or information. And once you define what you want to protect, then the next step is try to think how to protect it. If you want to protect, for example, information that is not changing and it doesn't need to be available, then maybe the best way is to put it in a hard drive in a basement and unconnected from the internet. That's actually the safest, right? So in many cases, we cannot do that because we still want to connect to our data. And once you define some things on what to protect and how to protect it, you will want to do, you will want to grant yourself visibility on the data. You want to collect data because if you want to detect attacks, you want to identify them, you need to know where to look. And if you don't have data, you don't have visibility on what is going on, you will never do that. And in here, there are a lot of tools that can be implemented. For example, the typical case is firewalls, because the goal of the firewall is to prevent people from getting in, right? It's exactly that. So this is what happened before. And after that, the during and after phase is where things get really interesting, and where we are kind of working, but we are not very successful in general. And I think these are the two areas that I believe that we need you, and I'm going to try to explain you why. So during an attack is this phase is characterized by several things, but basically you have your system and you are people outside is trying to get into your system, and you need to actually respond, identify that you are being attacked and actually respond in real time. Because if you don't respond in real time, if you respond 1 second later, it's too late, right? We are not talking about during, we are talking about after. Identifying or working during this phase requires a real-time response. In this stage, we are also talking about big data. And when I say about big data, it's really big data. One of the examples that I thought I understood what big data was until I was talking with a friend, and he said, well, if we capture network traffic from one of our customers, we have like 300 gigabytes of network packets in like 30 seconds. Okay, so you want to monitor 1 day, that's a lot of data, right? And if you remember that we want to respond in real time, it's like, well, that's really a challenge. Another thing in this area is that there is a really high cost of failure. And here we are talking about false positives and false negatives, right? False positive is like, okay, I have a system that detects something. Well, what if your system tells me that you detect something as an infection or a malware or something that needs to be remediated, and actually it's not that. It actually was nothing. So imagine the case that I heard this, I think, a year ago of a company that was extracting oil from, they have an unmanned platform in the middle of the sea extracting oil. And they found, of course, they have a computer there, and they receive alert that the machine was infected, so they had to send 2 or 3 people in helicopter to the sea, drop them there with provisions for 3 days, only to find out that there is nothing. The cost of that movement was actually near $1 million, and everything for your false positive in your monitoring, right? So. And we are not talking about just the cost of money. We are talking about what if in the middle of the sea there was a storm and the people lost their lives. It's like everything because your detection was not good enough. And then on the other hand, we have false negatives, which is you say that everything was good, but actually it wasn't. There was something happening, and that put or endanger whatever system that I'm monitoring. So these 2 things are really costly and dangerous because they make the detection problem like really challenging. And also, when it comes with false positives, we have to remember that we are dealing with humans, right? Human analysts that have to interpret the results from whatever system you are building. So that means that if you report several false positives over and over again, humans will learn how to ignore that. And when finally you say something is true, and it is, they will probably ignore it, right? Because the last 10 times you told me something, it was not right. So it gets really complex. And in this stage, we want to detect and block. It's really simple. Something is happening, I want to know what should I do. Should I let it go or should I block it? And another interesting thing of this area or this challenge is that we are trying here not to gain something. We are trying not to lose anything, right? In the best case, we don't lose anything. We don't lose uptime, we don't lose files, we don't lose. So that is a reward that for some people is really frustrating because it's not like I'm bringing something positive. Well, yes, you are, but it's not tangible. In the best case, you are not losing anything. So this is one of the challenges that we are struggling in InfoSec, and we are not there yet, and we need more eyes looking into it. The other area is the after of an attack. Basically, it starts with assuming compromise. Imagine that whatever you have in place, it failed. It failed. Imagine that you don't have any security, right? You have to assume that at some point, people will get into your system. Imagine that they are there right now. So how do we find them, right? So the goal of this is discover intrusions, active intrusions that are working right now. There is a growing cost of failure here because the longer it takes us to actually find intrusion, the more we lose, right? The more we lose. If, for example, we detect an attack in the first day, they will take maybe, I don't know, 1 folder of documents. If we wait for 3 days or 1 week to detect this attack, then the amount of information we are going to lose is much larger, right? So, and if we go like that for a very long time, it might be it. Like, we might be out of business or we might lose everything. So it's really important kind of to find it as soon as possible. And it also requires big data analysis because we want to keep a history of things that are happening to make sure to be able to correlate different things and make sure that we identify things that happened maybe 1 week ago. We want that history to be there. And that means that imagine if for example, in my friend's scenario, that 30 seconds was 300 gigs of data, how can we keep a week? How can we keep a month, right? And in here, the goal of this area is to minimize the damage. As I say, we want to try to kill the attackers or reduce the impact of the attackers by identifying them as fast as we can. So on top of this, which sounds already challenging, we have privacy issues. We cannot actually capture pickups of network packets for everyone because all your data is there, right? Why would I want to have my password in 70 computers of all your employees? No, we don't want that. So there is a lot of privacy issues. Also, in this area, it's not really clear what is normal. What is normal for some people is not normal for some other. The typical example is that you hear, oh, it was China. So there is a company that detects China as a malware or malicious actor. But what if your company, for example, is working in China? All the connections to China are actually legitimate because they live there, right? Of course they connect to China. So it happens that the detection is what is anomalous and what is not. It's really changing. It's not like, okay, we have a set of images that show how, I don't know, for example, we saw like breast cancer look like this. We don't have that because that is kind of changing all the time. We also have the human factor. There are cases where we think that this environment should be secure, and what we don't count with is that there is a human monitoring that, and the human will take sometimes irrational decisions. But that is who we are, right? I remember I got infected one time. I was a student, and I was having to deliver my homework, and it was 2 a.m. I was super tired, and I got an email with some information that I thought it was relevant, and I clicked on it, and I lost everything in my computer. It was so frustrating. And I say, but I'm studying this, right? How can it happen to me? I can understand maybe, I don't know, my mom getting infected, but me? Seriously? And we don't take into account that we are humans, we are tired, there is not just one thing that we are not like simple neural network. We are a combination, right? We don't know what type of information we have in our minds at the moment we take the decision, and how that can alter the decisions we make. And also, another thing that we need to take into account in this InfoSec scenario is that label data is not there, right? So there was a beautiful example on the images and how to recognize them, and that there were like data sets of images with heads. That's great. In information security, we don't have that, right? So we have terabytes of data, and they tell you, you want to do machine learning to detect that? Yeah, great, here it is. Oh, where are the labels? No labels. So how do you work in that, right? There are some labels, they are scarce, and another thing that happens is that whatever was malicious 1 year ago, the same indicator that you are analyzing, it might be completely legitimate right now. So it is a really challenging problem that we are trying to solve, and there are solutions right now to approach these issues, but they are not enough. We are really struggling. That's why I thought that talking about this in a room full of data scientists, it was going to be very cool, because maybe you have ideas that are different point of views that can be really helpful, and maybe you can bring some fresh air to our area. So moving to an example, I work in my daily work with network proxy logs. This is an example of, it's just a few, let's say, fields of information. It's actually longer, but these are the more relevant. So you can see that there is a date, right? Then there is a URL. It's highlighted the protocol, in this case HTTP. We have an IP, we have the content type. Oh, this is text, plain, okay? Then we have the user agent. It tells us what type of browser we are using, maybe operating system, and so on. And this is actually a malicious command and control URL of a malware that is Sality, that I mentioned before. And this botnet, as I say, is alive for 10 years, and we still see every day users infected with it. And yeah, we are not doing that good. And the interesting thing about this is that, for example, in information security, the most common indicator is the hostname, right? In this case, Ceylan or something, .com. And this domain is actually a compromised domain. That means that it's legitimate and it's malicious at the same time. So how do you model that, right? So you start looking for other features, like, okay, the legitimate traffic might look different. In this case, the malicious behavior look like this, like it has the log of .gif and some parameters. Okay, I can use that. Well, things are getting a bit more complicated because our world is migrating to HTTPS, which will make this traffic look like this. So yeah, everything that we were using so far, right? Oh, this beautiful URL, yeah, it's not there anymore. Sorry about that. All the user agent bytes and so on, it's different, and we lose a lot of information. And we are expecting that actually machine learning will help us with this, and it helps us in many ways. We are able to detect, for example, specific servers used for malicious purposes. But when it comes with cases like this, where you have two behaviors in the same thing at the same time, it gets really, really tricky. And there is where it gets really challenging, right? It's like a beautiful problem to try to solve. And so in my work, I work with this type of traffic. And what we do is, imagine this is a normal network, and we have these little boxes that are computers. And what we do is our customers collect all this web traffic, and they send it to us. So we do our machine learning processing, and then we give them a verdict. This is kind of more like my day-to-day environment, because until last year, we have 1 million users. Imagine that when I first got there and they told me this, you have all this data available for you, I was like, oh yes, finally, some data to work with. It was beautiful. Until I found out that I can, how do you work with this? It's like impossible, right? So it would be much more useful if we, instead of having to look at everything, right, we have to look at some things highlighted for us as interesting. So that is the problem we are trying to solve. I don't have time to look at everything. So can we have some kind of mechanism that shows me what to look at so I can prioritize? So in this case, we have like 3 different groups. Red is more dangerous, yellow is less dangerous, and orange is medium. And say like, okay, this is split like this. So I, as a human analyst, I can go and say like, okay, I want to look at the red one because I have only 2 hours, right? So my environment look a bit different after this. And this is kind of what we try. I hope it's visible. So my group has been doing this for the last 10 years. And they first started with anomaly detection. That's, let's say, the first thing that you need to try. And actually, yeah, no, it doesn't work very well, It works, but you cannot have just anomaly detection because it's not good enough. We are talking, again, going back to the high cost of failure. We cannot afford to have like 10, 100 false positives. So what we found is that actually it's not just about how beautiful random forest can you build. It's like how can you combine all these things together in order to have something that actually works when you plug it to the network. So in a big overview, this is what we built so far. First, we have the anomaly detection part, because we receive more than 10 billion web requests per day. So we need to, and we are trying to be as real-time as possible, which, is very hard. But we needed in the first stage something really simple and really fast. So what we did is to have, instead of just one simple anomaly detection, we have like 40 or 50 or more individual anomaly detectors that each of them look at the traffic in different ways, right? That's what the human analysts do, actually. So all these things give a verdict and say like, okay, it's malicious for me. Oh, no, for me it's not, for me it's not, for me it's not. Oh, for me as well. So the next thing is like, can we get an agreement on this? So that's where the trust modeling phase comes in, and that joins all the verdict together and do other things and try to keep the things that are more anomalous and then drop the rest of the traffic, because we don't want to keep all the information, because there's tons of data that we don't want to keep because, we want to protect the privacy of our users as much as possible, and also because we don't want to be a target, right? The moment you start storing infinite information, you suddenly become a target of other actors that are going after the information. So after that, what we do is layer 2, classification and entity modeling, is grouping things together and trying to find different things and creating a group of actions per user. And then we correlate that information, and in the end, we have an incident per user for if the user was infected. So in this way, we are able to reduce 10 billion web requests per day into 20,000 incidents. So it actually looks something like this, which is pretty cool. But it's not enough. If you ask me, we still find ourselves that we have big customers that have, I don't know, 500, 800, or maybe more alerts or incidents per day, and how do you actually do that, right? We consider ourselves that we are at the top of what we can do with all the techniques and research that we are putting into it, but still, there are always too many alerts to go through. And actually, in the other end of the room, there is an analyst which looks like me, and trying to make sense of that and say, like, yeah, it's great what you guys are doing, but you know, I can go over 10 maybe. So which 10 should I pick? Because you know, I don't have time. So there are three main things that that I wanted to sort of split these two challenges in. Because so far what we try to do is to look at the problem in a single way, right? Create this awesome machine learning or solution that will solve the problems like as a whole. And it works up to some point, but it's really challenging because you try to solve everything, and you know, when you try to solve everything, it's very hard. So I split them in what I think they are the three main areas that each of these challenges can be divided to. One is the real-time defense, because even in any of the areas where it is during an attack or after an attack, you want to be able to respond as soon as possible, right? And in this area, the challenges for you are how can we make the algorithms faster, right? Able to act and respond, consume a lot of data, and give a response very, very fast. So inside our group, we are doing a lot of optimization. There are tests that say, oh, it takes 2 seconds. Well, it's too slow. And it's so frustrating, right? But we cannot afford to be slower, because when you combine everything, it finally, I don't know, takes 6 hours. Right? And maybe in 6 hours, the attackers took already everything that they wanted to take. So we need to be faster. And if we think in the challenges for the next 5 to 10 years, the key is like, how can we solve this faster? How can we tune the current algorithms, optimize them to respond like more close to real time? The second area that we can divide this during and after is try to find things that we already know what they look like, right? Try to find more of what we already know. For example, in the case that I was mentioning of Sality, how is possible that a botnet or a malware that is been created 10 years ago keeps working? Not only keeps working, keep infecting systems every day, every month. We have like dozens of those. Yes, they have some tricks, they use some tricks, but come on, we have 10 years of data. How is it possible that we cannot do better, right? So there is a huge challenge when it comes to our field that is like, how can we forget about discovering sophisticated threats? What about how can we get better at taking what we know, take the hundreds of 200, 300 more active threats and trying to find them wherever they are, whether if your data set is network traffic, whether your data set is binary files, how can we make sure that they are not successful anymore? And then the other challenge is to discover new things, because sophisticated actors, they will always come up with something that was not known before, right? The crash override or Industroyer, the malware that took down the power grid, that was new at the time. And the next time they strike, they will do something different so they will avoid to be detected, right? So how can we learn from all these 10, 15 years of malware knowledge and try to discover new things? So we have like these two big challenges, like detect things while they are happening, like during an attack. Then we have what things are happening after an attack, and then how to improve the real-time defense, how to know or find better things that we already know, and how to find new things. So there are like really interesting challenges that I wish I could say that we are in the right direction. I think in InfoSec, we have been looking at the problem in the same way for a long time. And, you know, it doesn't get better. We try different things. I'm not saying we are not successful. We are stopping several hundreds of infections every day in every single network. But if we think every time a new threat comes or appears, they are successful. 2 months ago, 1 month ago actually, we have the WannaCry history of the ransomware everywhere. They were exploiting a vulnerability that make them spread really fast. This week on Tuesday, there was a similar malware exploiting the same vulnerability, and they had hundreds of thousands of infections in the same way, just 1 month later. So we are still unable to kind of detect these things and stop them. So there are a lot of challenges waiting for you if you want to take them. So we really need new people looking at the problem. And that's why I thought it was a really good idea, and I was honored to come here to talk to you, because if you have a different background at InfoSec, it's great. You should be looking at this problem, because you might be the person that can actually crack this up, right? And if you have a background, different background, physics, chemistry, whatever, it's great, because you can actually give us a second different way of seeing things that might solve our problems. I feel that we are stuck. We are advancing, progressing, but if we want to be ahead of adversaries, it doesn't look very nice right now. So I encourage you to kind of think on these problems. I would love if you get into topic or you try new things. And for that, I wanted to recommend for you to get started a specific dataset that was created by the Czech Technical University in Prague. It's a dataset that was created some years ago in 2011 that contains both. It's one of the few datasets out there that are relevant, let's say, that contains both normal traffic and malicious traffic on the same, let's say, captures. And they have labels. So it's one of the few datasets that are usable and that actually have some level of labels that says what this is normal, this is malicious, or this is malicious on this type of botnet. So this is an excellent resource to start getting into topic, because this is very rare. In our everyday, we don't get this, right? And so this is a really good start if you want to get into this. Hopefully the QR code works. If not, you can search for CTU 13, and you will get straight away there. So I really encourage you again to get into topic, because it's really fascinating. I get to study malware and analyze it every day, and I see how frustrating it is for customers and end users that, oh, again, we have another malware, and again, my files, my money, my life was compromised, and why? Can we do better than this? It's like, we should, right? If we think in 5–10 years, we should be much better. And I think it's by joining people from other fields to look at our problems and getting help is the way to go. So, thank you.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. I feel like this is a good challenge. Like maybe we should start a Kaggle competition for this data set. We have a little bit of time for questions. So if I can ask one of the volunteers to help me with questions. We have a little bit of time. Of course, we will have more time tomorrow in the Q&A, which we will have in the breakout room.
Hi. One question, in your opinion, what's the most valuable data source to detect malware? I mean, is it NetFlow, is it proxy, or is it a combination?
Well, it depends. If you are working with network, if you are interested in the network part, proxy logs, whether it's HTTP, HTTPS, will give you a very nice experience, because there is still a lot of traffic on through HTTP. You have a lot of features to play with. This is great. but you have only web traffic. So that is limiting you, like the world view, because there is a lot of attacks that happen through, I don't know, other ports, other protocols that you are not observing. So I think that if you take a look at the CTU 13, you have samples of what would you see in case of if you are observing NetFlow, and what would you see if you are observing proxy logs, and you can choose whatever you think that is better. Right now, in our group, we are using primarily proxy logs, and since last month, we start also consuming NetFlows, which is, at least from an analyst point of view, is really, really challenging because you have very few information. But I think that if you want to get started, probably proxy logs are more easy or more familiar. You have more resources to understand what is going on.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I have one remark, I think, more. What is your I think there's a panel coming up on ethics in machine learning, and I think this is one of the examples where you know it's not necessarily. I mean, you can use, like most things have two sides, and you can use this stuff for good reasons and bad reasons. And I'm not sure if helping Cisco to understand deeply what's going on in the network is always good. Like there's certainly, I mean, there's certainly, like, you know, there's companies providing censorship infrastructures for countries. These are certainly the big companies in the field. So what is your stance on ethics of what's going on in your group? I think you can't answer for whole Cisco, and it's fine.
Exactly.
But for your group, it's
yeah. So Cisco is huge, as you say. So I'm going to talk specifically about my group, CTA. So in cognitive analytics, we know that the majority of a big portion of issues comes from people not respecting the data, right? And we are a group of really paranoid people. So we don't want to see our data out there, and we don't want to keep any data. So what we do is the reduction we do is from, we keep like less than 5% of the data, and the rest we throw away because we don't want to keep it. We don't want that responsibility. We don't want to look at the face of our customers and say like, sorry, oops. We don't want to say that. And we know for experience that the majority of the big companies, they all have been breached, right? And there is a common phrase that says, there are two types of companies, those who have been breached and those who don't know yet. So we don't want to be either of them. So we try to anonymize as much as possible. We try to keep things as minimum. We need this specific information, and the rest we try to throw it away. Of course, we need some data, and we take all necessary precautions to keep it. And even though historical data, we reduce it to a certain amount of months, and after that, we just drop it. Because, yeah, we try to approach the problem as we hope other people approach the problem with our data, right? But it's very tricky because the more data you have, the more able you are to do stuff. So it's very hard to do a balance. I hope it answers your question.
Hi, I have a question regarding the V you talked about or addressed. Last year, the German Minister of Interior requested a so-called Cyberfeuerwehr, so cyber firefighters, that should come in for public services once there's an emergency security alert. What do you think? Who should take the leading role when it comes to fighting such alerts? Should it be public service? Should it be independent researchers? Should it be big companies?
Can you repeat just the beginning? That I lost it.
There was the German Minister of Interior, Thomas de Maizière, requested in German it's called Cyberfeuerwehr. In English it's translated into cyber firefighters.
Oh, right.
So for coming in once there's an alert.
Okay. So I think it's right now we have observed let's say, a weaponization of malware and viruses, where before we have seen criminals to use this software for their own profit, and in the last year or 2 years, or maybe in isolated cases before, right now it's more like, let's say, more common, we are observing them to be used as weapons, governmental weapons from one country to another and so on, and not only to steal things, but also to manipulate media and information. So it gets really complex, like at who needs to answer that, right? If you ask me, I think every one of us is responsible to protect and to make this better in one way or another. Every time I go to my parents' home, the computer is a mess, and I deliberately sit down and fix it, because I know we are all part of that. So I think that creating governmental organizations for fighting these things maybe at some point is necessary, but it should be really, really transparent, because we are already seeing, for example, the case with Ahmed Mansour, that he was targeted by the government, right? And we don't want that. We don't want a second wave of, because we analyze who you are not, we are targeting you, we are surveilling you, or you don't have benefits. We don't want to go there. And when government takes care of these things, it's very hard to track, because most governments are not transparent enough. So I think in that case, it's up to us to stand up and say, we want this. If you are doing this, be transparent and think it is your right to know what is going on, right? But I think at some point it already started, and it might feel that we cannot stop it, but I think we should, let's say, get ourselves informed and claim and push for more transparency in that sense. Otherwise, it's going to get really messy very soon.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. And again, there will be a Q&A tomorrow with Veronica as well.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering, because you use machine learning to detect malware, malware creators are not doing the exact same thing, so using machine learning to avoid being detected by you, so if it cannot turn basically into just a competition of who has better machine learning.
Yeah. I think they will eventually go there. Right now, what we observe with, let's say, that there are like two type of, let's say, malicious actors, like to divide them very broadly. One is those that go for profit, and we have, on the other hand, really careful and sophisticated actors. And the ones that go for profit, they will never spend so much effort if something really far more simple works, because it's a minimum effort rule. It's like, I'm not going to pay $10 more if I can pay $2. It's like, no, there is no way. So I think in that sense, it's going to take longer for them to use this more, let's say, more sophisticatedly speaking. They are already doing some kind of data mining and responding, using these technologies to respond to that. There is a good example on scammers and type of phishing that they sell these, online drugs and things like that, because they get attacked within each other. So they need to, for example, filter what are the real orders. And for that, they have tons of information. So they are already doing some kind of mining of the data. But I think that the techniques they are using are still basics. So I believe that it's going to take some time for them to catch up. And I hope they don't move that fast, that they give us some time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent. Can we thank Veronica one more time?